Coming up on Locked On Dodgers, the Dodgers started a new winning streak, beating the Brewers 4-0 in Milwaukee. But the big news of the day was the news that Walker Buehler's season is over. He is going to have elbow surgery. We're going to talk all about that, and then we will talk about the solid team victory, great performance by Julio Urias and other pitchers in the Dodgers win over the Brewers. So let's get Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Dodger fans. This is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Remember, this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. Or even better, go ahead and subscribe wherever you're watching or listening right now, and then you'll never miss a day because you know we're not going to. If this is your first time watching or listening, my name is Jeff Snider. My co-host is Vince Samperio. We're actually doing a split episode today, so I will be with you for the first half of the show. Vince will be with you for the second half. Vince and I are both lifelong Dodger fans just like you are. We've also both spent time covering the Dodgers in the press box and the locker room, so we're not quite insiders, but we bring you a smart fan's perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning. So again, please subscribe and let's get started. Obviously, the big news on Monday was that Walker Buehler's season is over. He had been progressing. He had been out to throwing about 120 feet, and he felt some discomfort. And basically, from what we've learned, the scans didn't really show what was causing the discomfort. And so they are going in for, it sounds like, basically exploratory surgery. Basically, they're going to go in there, open up his elbow, and actually look at the ligaments and see what's going on because the MRI isn't showing anything. What that means is we have no idea what the prognosis is, what the recovery time is. We don't really know anything other than that Walker Buehler's season is over. And it's a bummer. It's really bad news. It's not what we were hoping for. We were hoping for Walker Buehler to come back. Basically, what we were all hoping, I think, is that Walker Buehler's struggles this year were because of an undiagnosed elbow problem, that he would get healthy, come back, and be the Walker Buehler we expected him to be, the Walker Buehler he's been the last several years. And so we had high hopes for Buehler coming back in September and especially in October. And I guess November now, I should say, that MLB released the postseason schedule on Monday. And the World Series, if it goes 7 games, will end on November 5th. It's guaranteed. The earliest it could end is November 1st. And so there would definitely be baseball into November. And we were hoping that Walker Buehler would be pitching some of that baseball into November. That's not going to happen. So I'm not going to sugarcoat and say it's not bad news. But I don't know, like, I'm not devastated by this news. And a lot of people seem devastated. I actually saw a tweet from somebody. I don't think it was anybody I follow. It was like a response to somebody else's something. Oh no, it was a comment. I was actually watching the Dodgers Nation live stream earlier today with Clint and Brooke and Doug and Eric. But and one of the comments on their thing said that they were walking in the parking lot at the grocery store when they heard the news, and they just fell to their knees, devastated. I'm not there. I love Walker Buehler. I'm a huge Walker Buehler fan. And again, I was hoping to have him back and effective. But the fact is, Walker Buehler hasn't been a part of what the Dodgers have done this year. The Dodgers, they won their 80th game Monday night. They're the first team in baseball to 80 wins. They're 17 games up in their division. Their run differential is like 50 runs better than the next best team. They are easily the best team in baseball so far, and that is something they've done without Walker Buehler. Buehler pitched 12 games. He had 12 starts. He had a 4.02 ERA. 4.02 is not terrible. It's not terrible, but it is bad by the standards of the 2022 Dodgers. The Dodgers have the best ERA in baseball, well under 3. Walker Buehler's ERA is actually dragging that up. The only pitchers on the active roster with worse ERAs than what Walker Buehler had this year are Reyes Maranta, who allows a home run every time he pitches and is going to be back in the minor leagues soon. Phil Bickford, who people are wondering if he's a one-hit wonder because he has been really bad this year, and Craig Kimbrell, who people want to fire into the sun. Those are the three pitchers on the Dodgers' current roster who have a higher ERA than Walker Buehler this year. Walker Buehler's ERA, 4.02. He's the only pitcher, the only guy who made, the only pitcher who made any starts for the Dodgers this year and had a higher ERA than Buehler was Michael Grove, who allowed 3 earned runs in 4 2/3 innings in his one and only start this year for a 5.79 ERA. He's the only one. Everybody else who's made a start for the Dodgers, Ryan Pepiot, 392. Andrew Heaney, 116. Mitch White, 370. Clayton Kershaw, 264. Tyler Anderson, 281. Tony Gonsolin, 224. And Julio Urias, 249 coming into today. It's actually lower now because he went 5 shutout innings. I don't have his current ERA, but safe to say it's well below 4.02. And so, again, none of this is to say I'm not bummed, because I was hopeful that Walker Buehler would come back and dominate in September and October. But the Dodgers don't need that. It would have been nice to have, but they don't need it. They have been the best team in baseball this year. And that's the thing. I think sometimes people forget that baseball in October is still the same sport as baseball in April and June and August. It's the same sport. The goal is to score more runs than your opponent in each game. That's how you win a game. And there's 2 ways to do that. Score a bunch of runs or don't allow very many runs, or ideally a combo of those two. The Dodgers have been really good at all of those things this year, and that's been without Buehler or despite Buehler, depending on which part of the year we're talking about. And so, it's not devastating news for the 2022 Dodgers. It's bad news for Buehler, and it's losing what we thought might be a bonus they would be getting. But the Dodgers are going to be fine. And one of the reasons they're going to be fine is a big, tall redhead named Dustin May. Dustin May, it was officially announced on Monday, he will make his season debut on Saturday at Dodger Stadium against the Marlins. Dustin May, he looked great in his rehab assignment. He is going to be basically what we hoped, or realistically what Buehler would have been. You know, Dustin May doesn't have the postseason track record that Walker Buehler has. He doesn't have quite the cachet that Buehler does. Dustin May is really, really good and is going to fill an important role on this Dodgers team. And, the timing, it would have been nice if we actually had Dustin May back for a start or two before we found out Walker Buehler wasn't coming back. But he's pitched really well in his rehab starts. He's pitched really well in the big leagues when he's been in the big leagues before. And so there's really no reason to think that Dustin May's not going to pitch pretty darn well for the Dodgers this year. And as we've seen repeatedly, we don't need shutouts from the Dodgers pitching. Sometimes we get shutouts like we did on Monday. But you don't need shutouts because this offense is pretty good. Now, if they go up against the Mets and the Mets happen to have DeGrom and Scherzer both healthy, I'm still dubious that both of those guys will actually be healthy in October, just because that's a long way away and neither of them is very good at staying healthy for that long. But, yeah, the Dodgers aren't going to score 8 runs a game against the Mets probably. But I think they can score off the Mets. I think they can put up a few runs on those guys, and the pitching they have, I think, will be plenty to. The Dodgers are going to be the favorites in any postseason series they're in, and that's because on paper the Dodgers are the best team in baseball. Now, losing Walker Buehler doesn't change that. Getting Dustin May back doesn't change that. All of it means is we've seen what's on paper. Now they got to go out and play the games. I'm going to come back in a minute. I'm going to talk about one other guy who might be sneaking into some sort of conversation as far as contributing to the Dodgers this year. But first, I want to talk to you about Built Bar, and specifically Built Puffs. If you haven't tried Built Puffs yet, look, we're friends. You and me, we've been through a lot together. I've told you about Built Puffs. If you haven't tried them yet, you only have yourself to blame. I've done my part. I'm going to do my part one more time, and then I'll do it again the next time they pay me to read this ad. But I'm telling you, I'm not just saying this because they pay me to read the ad. I love Built Bars. I love Built Puffs. They are really, really good, especially the cookie dough chunk Built Puff. Oh, they're so good. Built Puffs, they're like marshmallows covered in chocolate, and the cookie dough chunk, Built Puffs. It's a marshmallow covered in chocolate and then little chunks of cookie dough on top. Delicious. And oh, did I mention they're healthy for you? 160 calories, 15 grams of protein in this cookie dough chunk Built Puff. You can't go wrong with that. It's delicious and healthy. It's magical. So whether it's those that you want to get some Built Bars, whatever you're doing, go to Built.com and use promo code LOCKEDON15. Please note, it's a new promo code, LOCKEDON15. Locked15 will not work anymore. Promo code LOCKEDON15, and you'll get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKEDON15 at Built.com. Okay, folks, I am back, and I'm just with you for a few more minutes before I turn it over to Vince. And I just want to talk a little bit about one other guy who may become part of the equation for the Dodgers on the mound this year. I talked about him recently, and I was more dismissive of the idea. And with the news of Buehler and a few other things, I want to talk about Bobby Miller. Bobby Miller pitched in Double-A on Sunday. He went 7 1/3 innings, 4 hits, no runs allowed, 2 walks, 9 strikeouts. That was after 11 strikeouts in 6 innings his previous stint, 11 strikeouts in 6 innings, 2 starts before that. I mentioned last time I talked about he's had some clunkers, but he was really, really good. He threw 103 pitches in this game on Sunday, which was his first time topping. Looks like he had maxed out at about 9. Oh, he had 96, 95. So first time going over 100, 103 pitches. And then we got the news on Monday that he has been promoted to AAA. That, I think, when I talked about Bobby Miller the other day, I said if we were going to see him in the big leagues this year like we thought we might, I would think he would have been promoted by AAA by now. Now that he has been, I think it does make it a little bit more possible and likely that we will see him in September to see if he can contribute to the Dodgers in the postseason. Because with his stuff, he throws so hard, he's got really good stuff. He could be a dominant reliever in the postseason, a guy who can go 2 or 3 innings for you, even if you need him to, whether you want to go 1 inning. We don't know where we're going to get from Craig Kimbrell in the postseason. Vince is going to talk about the fact that David Price has actually been better than we might have expected lately. But Bobby Miller has the stuff to come in, and I don't expect him to be a starter for the Dodgers this year. But I could see him coming in and being a multi-inning reliever and being really, really good in that role. And I do think the loss of Buehler, now that we know for sure Buehler's not going to be back for the postseason, I think that makes it a little bit more likely. Still don't know if I would say it's actually likely, but it's more likely anyway, because that, whatever role Buehler was going to fill would have bumped somebody to the bullpen. Well, that person being bumped to the bullpen now isn't bumped to the bullpen, which means that's a bullpen spot that's open. How many other times can I say bullpen in one sentence? It's a weird word to say repeatedly, but Bobby Miller could be that guy. He's got such good stuff, and it would be a lot of fun. He's a guy who nobody in the league has seen unless they've faced him in Double-A. But you're not going to see many teams in the postseason who have players who've ever seen Bobby Miller pitch. It's only his second season in organized ball because he was drafted during the pandemic year. And so 2021, 2022, that's it for him in the minor leagues. And so he would be an unknown quantity with really good stuff, and in shorter spurts might even catch add a tick or two to his fastball. Could be somebody to watch out for. Like I said, I wouldn't say it's likely, but I feel like it's more likely, and something that I don't think the timing of him being promoted to AAA and the news about Buehler, I don't think that's coincidental. So, in summary, Dustin May is coming back. Bobby Miller may be coming up. Walker Buehler is out for the season. At least it's possible even that this could turn into Tommy John surgery. Buehler already had Tommy John surgery once in his career, shortly after the Dodgers drafted him. We don't know. We're not going to know until they do the surgery which is in a week and a half, 2 weeks, something like that. And then we'll have a better idea. But we know Buehler isn't coming back this season, and the Dodgers can start planning. Dustin May is a big part of those plans, and I feel like Bobby Miller might become part of those plans. And with that, that's going to wrap it up for me. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, the Dodgers did play a game on Monday, and they won it. They started a new winning streak. They've now won one game in a row. The Padres lost, so the Dodgers lead goes back to 17 games. The Brewers don't lose any ground on the Padres in the wild card race, so good news for them, I guess. And Vince is going to talk all about that game. Really good pitching and some solid offense, and a cool moment for Gavin Lux hitting a home run in front of his grandparents. First time they've seen him play in the big leagues hit a home run. That's pretty cool. So Vince will be along in a minute.
Yo, Dodger fans. Vince here to carry out the episode. Real quick, just had some of my own thoughts on Buehler that Jeff didn't touch on, or maybe he did touch on, but just in my own words. I'm in the similar boat with Jeff of, losing Walker Buehler sucks. I don't like it at all. I'm not a fan of it. I would prefer him to be pitching in October for the Dodgers, but I don't think it's the end all be all that some are making it. I think we've seen a lot of teams win with worse pitching rotations. I think that the Dodgers offense is a key part of this. And the other part that I saw was, going up against Scherzer and DeGrom if they do face the Mets. Scherzer and DeGrom aren't going up against, Tony Gonsolin or Tyler Anderson. They're going up against the Dodgers offense, and the Mets offense is going up against whoever's starting for the Dodgers or whoever's pitching for the Dodgers. So while, yes, it is tougher to face DeGrom, Scherzer, because they might not give up a lot of runs, it's also not a matter of Scherzer versus whoever, DeGrom versus whoever. It's Scherzer and DeGrom versus the Dodgers offense, whoever's pitching for the Dodgers, Julio, Kershaw, whoever it is, against the Mets offense. That's where the battle is. So it doesn't necessarily matter. If the Dodgers have a better offense on paper than the Mets, then they have the advantage offensively, even though they're facing maybe better pitching. Whereas if you see the Dodger pitching is lesser than DeGrom and Scherzer, but the Mets offense is also lesser, it's similar ground. So I don't, obviously, Scherzer and DeGrom, obviously we've seen pitchers dominate. We saw Scherzer and Strasburg, help the Nationals pitch their way to a World Series. But we've also seen teams with not that great starting pitching win. Why? Because of timely offense, because of strong bullpen, which is something the Dodgers can build off of, and which is something they have already, bullpen and offense-wise. So it sucks for Walker Buehler. It's a big moment for, kind of hard to thrust Dustin May into it, but it's one of those where if Dustin May can step up, he can be a Walker Buehler type. His stuff is nasty. It'll play up in the playoffs. He'll be touching, 100, 101, hopefully. And he can be that guy that has no fear for the Dodgers. Clayton Kershaw doesn't have the blow-by stuff, but he can still be a serviceable starter. I don't know. Obviously playoffs change a lot of things, and the harder you throw, it helps out a little bit. But guys can get by. Kershaw got by in 2020. And he'll be able to do the same thing. Julio's starting to throw a little bit harder. Julio's been a guy that's been good for the Dodgers the last two regular seasons, has been good in the postseason. Last year they used him maybe not the right way or tried to leverage his 2020 season into 2021, and it wasn't quite the same because he had to pitch a full season in 2021. But he's used to it now. He's the guy ready to go. You got Gonsolin, Anderson, Heaney. These are guys that can get out. And with the release of the schedule, we saw there's going to be less off days in the earlier series. And it's a matter of the Dodgers are going to try to figure out that whatever that mix is going to be, they're going to try to figure it out here in the last month and a half, because it's a matter of, do you want to take a bunch of bullpen arms and only 4 starting pitchers? Do you want to take 5 or 6 starting pitchers and those guys can maybe piggyback and you try to steal a game by only using two to 3 pitchers at most? There's going to be a lot for the Dodgers to kind of figure out and see the way they want to go. But ultimately, it's going to come down to the offense and the bullpen. The starting pitching will factor in it, obviously, but I don't think it's as big a factor as some people are making it out to be. And I also think it's downplaying a little bit what the Dodgers starting pitching has done. Yes, has Tony Gonsolin struggled in the postseason before? Yes, but a lot of guys have struggled in the postseason before and been fine after. I think it's a more matter of trying to get these guys some extra rest here and there, whether that's going to a 6-man rotation or whether that's getting some guys a phantom IL stint. I don't think Anderson needs it. He needs a different story. I do think Gonsolin would benefit from maybe either having less starts the rest of the way in the 6-man rotation or taking a couple starts off, going on the injured list. Whatever the case is, I think the Dodgers should be able to handle it and are going to handle it. They're going to have to watch May, even if they keep May at a 5-inning, 85, 90 pitch range the rest of the season. That's more than enough for him to be able to go through a lineup twice in October and pass it on to a very strong bullpen, or maybe piggyback with someone like Tyler Anderson. Imagine seeing May throwing you 99-100 the whole game. Then you got Tyler Anderson throwing his changeup the entire time from the left side. It's a big change, and it could do things for the Dodgers. So over this last month and a half, if we see a lot of different combinations or some different combinations of things, it's going to be because that they're trying to figure out what exactly they're going to do in October, how they're going to attack it, and what we saw in 2020. It's a pitching staff, not a starting. There's starting pitchers and there's relievers, but in October it's a pitching staff, and they're going to mix and match as they see fit and however they think is going to help them win a championship. So that's my thoughts there. It sucks to lose Walker Buehler, but I do think the Dodgers are still very good shape when it comes to October, even without Walker Buehler. Now let's go to the BetOnline because they're BetOnline.net. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. You can find reviews and news of every league, including MLB, NFL, season coming up, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. Go learn about LIV and the PGA Tour and everything that's going on there. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They have you covered. So head to BetOnline today on your laptop or mobile device and learn more about the action happening right now. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, like Jeff mentioned, I'm going to talk about David Price, but first, just quickly on the game. Julio did not have his best stuff. He struggled. He gave up some hits, wasn't as sharp as we've seen him in recent times, was able to get through 5 shutout innings. That's the sign of a good starting pitcher. Even if you don't have your stuff, you're able to find a way to keep your team in the game. And even better for Julio, not allow any runs. He was able to pitch around the traffic on the bases. And the other part is he touched 96 mile an hour a couple or more than a few times, which is really good. He one of the beat writers said that he recently made a change to incorporate his legs a little more into his mechanics, and that's been a reason that he's been able to throw the ball harder recently, which is a good sign. Like I said, especially him, he might be game one starter. I think last week or 2 weeks ago I talked about he is our game one starter, assuming we don't know what happened with Buehler. Now we know what's happened with Buehler. I think Julio Urias is your #1 game one starter when the Dodgers make the postseason. Now, the other caveat there is unless Dustin May is just lights out ridiculous and, proves that over here in the last month and a half, and then you can kind of figure out, okay, what do we want to do? But I still think Julio, if he continues to pitch the way he's pitched the entire season, there's no reason not to give him the ball in game one and not feel confident about it. He's done it in the postseason. He's done it as a kid. He's done it now. He's matured into, a mid-20s, very good starting pitcher. Should have been an all-star. And if they have a second half all-stars, Julio would definitely be it, because after his 5 scoreless innings, his second half career ERA dropped to 1.87, I believe, which is the lowest by any starting pitcher in their career that's thrown over 180 innings in the second half of the season. So second half Julio is a thing, and if that pushes into October, the Dodgers are in a good spot. The other, Gavin Lux hit a home run, opposite field. That was good to see. That was a shot. He hit one that was the only reason it didn't go further is because there was a wall right there, and it smacked into the wall. That was a good sign to see. Mookie Betts with took off on Christian Yelich on a sac fly, and tested his arm, and his arm was like they maybe thought was not the business, and they were able to score. And it was a good overall game for the Dodgers offensively. They put up enough runs. They didn't do too much, but they did get into the bullpen a little bit early. I know Freddie Peralta came back from injury, so it wasn't expected to go that deep anyways. But they got into the bullpen earlier than maybe the Brewers wanted. So they seen some of those arms, and they were able to keep the game close enough to where you see some maybe higher leverage arms, which is good in the first game of a 4-game series. The other part was it happened on the other side. Julio only went 5. The Dodgers had to throw some of their guys, but Caleb Ferguson pitched, which he's still having a lot of run this year. We saw Evan Phillips come in. He pitched. We saw Chris Martin pitch. Evan Phillips scared us a little bit, taking a ball off, looked like his knee or shin, but he seemed fine. Hopefully that remains the case and he doesn't have to go on the injured list or anything like that. But we gets us to the guy who finished out the game, and that's David Price. And David Price is a guy who's had an interesting season. It's one of those where you look up and you're like, oh, David Price has been pretty good recently. And pretty good is to the tune of a 2.51 ERA. He's pitched in 32 games. He has 34 strikeouts in 32 in the third inning. His whip's 1.24, but a lot of that is not necessarily from, the whip is 1.24, not that great. But you look at his last 7 games, his whip is 0.39. You look at his last 15 appearances, his whip is 1.09. So in the last 15 times he's pitched, he has a 1.23 ERA, 14 and 2/3 innings pitched, 2 earned runs, 12 strikeouts. So he's a guy that has been not serviceable, better than serviceable for the Dodgers. But, there's different caveats you can go about it. He hasn't really been in too many high leverage situations. We'll go through the negatives. Hasn't been in too many high leverage situations. He doesn't quite have as strong a stuff as he had obviously when he was younger, and it doesn't seem like the Dodgers are really prepared to be using him in October, similar to how it was last year. But then you go on and look at some of the stuff he's changed, and you think, maybe he does have a chance. And I think I saw a few tweets of, people would rather see David Price than Craig Kimbrell on an October roster. And it's hard to argue just because, like I said, what we've seen, whether they're high leverage spots or not, he's getting outs. He's still facing guys that, maybe Craig Kimbrell would have faced and not fared as well. And you look at some of the stuff and you're trying to figure out exactly, what's different this year. And the biggest difference is his fastball percentage has gone up. He's using his fastball 37.7% of the time. That's the highest he's had since back when he was in the Rays in 2010. He used to throw his fastball 54% of the time. Ever since then, he's never been above 30%. This year, he's at 37%. He's throwing in that cutter about 20% of the time, which is pretty much on par with what he's done the last few years. And then he's really gotten into a sinker around 30% of the time, but that's pretty much on par as well, maybe a little bit lower than his career. And he's not really throwing the changeup, which is the biggest difference. He's throwing the fastball 37.7% of the time, like I mentioned. That's almost 13, or it is nearly 13% higher than his career. He's throwing his changeup just 8.9% of the time, which is almost half of what he's done in his career. You look at last year also, he threw his changeup nearly a quarter of the time, 24.7%. This year's down to 8.9%. For whatever reason it is, whether it is because he's coming in these situations that are very low leverage and he's just trying to get outs, but he's getting those outs and he's being effective when he's getting those outs. So it's a matter of, do you think David Price should be on the postseason roster? I think with the guys the Dodgers have coming back, I still don't have him as somebody that's going to be there in October. But I do think the Dodgers could maybe benefit from giving him some more high leverage spots here in the next month and kind of figure out what do we really have here with David Price, because it's a matter of whether we've written him off. I know Jeff and I have written him off a bunch of times. We thought he was going to get DFA'd back in like May or June, and he's continued to keep on chugging along, and he's gotten better as the season has gone on. And it's a matter of, maybe the Dodgers want to see what they have with David Price in terms of, can we use this guy in October? Can we throw him in a big spot? His fastball is up there. Obviously, he's not throwing 95, 96, but it's still up there in terms of, velocity. He's throwing 93, maybe sometimes touches 94. And he's a guy that, like I said, has been more than serviceable in the role he's in. But you just look at a potential postseason roster and you look at some of these locks that are going to be there, and you count it up and you got Caleb Ferguson's a lock. That's 1. You got Tony Gonsolin as a lock. That's 2. You got Clayton Kershaw, if he's healthy. That's 3. You got Dustin May. That's 4. You got Evan Phillips is 5. You got Blake Trinan healthy, 6. You got Julio, 7. You got Vesia, 8. You got Tyler Anderson. If you consider him a lock, that's 9. And then you have a bunch of guys after that. You have Yency Almonte, Phil Bickford, Brusdar Graterol when he comes back from healthy. He's a lock if he comes back healthy. You got Tommy Canley's on the outside looking in, but he's a guy. You got Reyes Morante. You got Pepio, who could fill a role. You got Craig Kimbrough, who I wouldn't put as a lock right now. And it's one of those where, okay, you can see David Price finding his way on there. There's a way for him on there, but I would prefer it to be because he's used in high leverage situations and the Dodgers can feel like they can trust him. I don't know. I don't think you need a high leverage or a low leverage guy in the postseason. That's usually not something that really happens. Hopefully it is. The Dodgers are putting up a bunch of runs and they do need low leverage guys, but your low leverage guy should be, a guy like Yency Almonte or, a guy like Vesia who can come in and be those lower leverage guys. But like I said, David Price can be that guy. I do think that what might hurt him because they might need some guys that can throw more than an inning. He hasn't really thrown more than an inning this year. Most of his outings are an inning. He goes into a second inning. Actually, let me double check before I say anything because maybe he has thrown multiple innings recently. But from what I can remember, yeah, his last few outings, since July 6th, he's gone more than an inning just 3 times. He's got an inning and a third, inning and 2/3, inning and 2/3. He's gone a third of an inning 3 times as well. So he's gone over an inning as many times as he's gone a third of an inning. And I don't think there's a role for a 1 inning low leverage guy on the postseason roster. Now, if guys do not come back healthy, Yency Almonte doesn't come back healthy, if Graterol doesn't come back healthy, if Blake Trinan somehow doesn't come back healthy, if Kershaw or whoever doesn't come back healthy and a guy like Tyler Anderson or Heaney end up being starter rather than a relief type role, then yeah, David Price has a spot on this team and on the postseason roster. I don't quite see it there, but I would like to see them give him some chances in some high leverage spots. It might be tough because Ferguson and Vesia are the lefties that get the high leverage spots, and then there's a bunch of righties that are above him in the pecking order. But if there's days where the Dodgers have played a bunch of games in a row, they've used their high leverage guys a few days in a row, or 2 out of 3 days, whatever the case is, I would like to see David Price get in some games where it's a 1-run game, 2-run game late in the game and see what he's got, see if he's got the juice. And from a guy that we know who's had it in the past in his career, and a guy who understands how important, being good in October is, I'd just like to see what he can do and see if he can find his way onto this postseason roster. So that's where we're at with David Price. That's going to do it for today's episode. Thank y'all for listening. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day every day. Check out Locked On MLB for your second listen of the day. The Locked On MLB podcast with Paul Francis Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully, covers the biggest stories around the league, and it's the #1 daily league-wide podcast. You can find it wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On MLB. Like you can find us on social media, Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Dodgers. Jeff is on Twitter at Snider. I'm at Samperio. If you have to leave us a voicemail, or not have to, but if you want to leave us a voicemail or send us a text, you can do so at 323-863-5625, or you can send us an email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be with us. When you get in your car or if you're at home, tell your smart device, play podcast Locked On Dodgers, and remember, you don't have to agree, you just have to listen. Have a good one.